Well, welcome to another episode in series two of Women in Politics Independence Day. I'm Jaynie Morris. It's great to have your company once again. I hope you've enjoyed. Well, actually, I don't need to say I hope you've enjoyed. I've been getting a lot of comments, a lot of feedback on all of our episodes so far, where we've been shining a light on women in politics in Australia at the moment because of the federal elections coming up mid-year this year. However, as any of you who are regular listeners in onto this podcast or viewers of our vodcast, you would know that this is now going to extend worldwide. We're getting a lot of feedback from women around the world who are planning on either are already running or planning on running for either local government, statewide government, or even federal government in their countries. And so we intend to keep doing the work of shining the light on these incredible women. So today in this series, my guest hails from Victoria in Australia. Her name is Susan Benedyka, and she is running as a independent Senate candidate. How's my voice today? Senate candidate for the upcoming Australian federal elections. Now, Susan is no stranger to the industry of politics because she's been working alongside in various roles that she has had throughout her career, which is incredibly extensive, including the fact that she is managing director of the Regional Development Company. Is that correct? Yes. And she's got a lot of other great experience she's going to share with us. But as you know, with our podcast, it's all about getting behind the person. So Susan, welcome to Women in Politics.
Thanks so much, Jaynie, and thanks for having these conversations to shine a light on people coming into politics. And I love that you're doing the background, the story behind the person. I just think we're better off knowing the sort of people who are representing us, and that we are more likely to look like the whole of our community and trying to represent that whole of community.
Thank you. And would you, before we get into talking right about you, just to follow on with what you just said, would you agree with the fact, as we know, independent candidates are especially in the upcoming Australian election, are the highest number that they've ever been. However, would you agree then that these independent, in particular women that are rising up, know that it's important for their constituents, for the community at large, to actually know the person, the real person as well?
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's been a thing in leadership for a long time about authentic leadership, being in your own skin, being who you are and leading from where you are. And I think we've got to do that in politics as well. We've got to say who's real here, who's not just put up by a major party, for example, and you know, they backwash or they wipe out all of someone's personal story because they don't want anything to be found. I just actually think that that's quite disingenuous. We are each people in our own right. We've got lives. When you get to my age, in the mid-60s, we've got lives that have had ups and downs, but we are product of all of that. That's what makes us who we are. So definitely getting behind it, getting to know someone as a real person means that they're more likely to want to get to know you as a real person as well. And that reality, that authenticity is what works.
Exactly. So let's get into it. Tell us all about you, Susan. So let me start with the question. You were born, then what happened?
Well, I was born in Broken Hill. So Broken Hill, for those outside Australia, is a mining town in the outback. So it's a small rural town. It was, at the time I was born, about 30,000 people. So it's declined in population since then. It's come down from its peak. It'd be around the 20,000 people now. I've grown up in rural and regional Australia, and I've lived all my life and managed to get onto some fantastic positions on regional, national, statewide boards, all from rural and regional Australia, because that's my passion, is regional development.
And where has that passion stemmed from? Was it something from your childhood growing up in those areas, or has it come from somewhere else?
I think it's come from a community development ethos. So I grew up, the place where I grew up was Wagga Wagga, which is a larger regional city. In fact, Penny Scott, you had on recently, and Penny's from that area. In Wagga Wagga, you just got involved in community. My family's very community-minded, play a lot of sports, get involved in everything that's community-led and community-driven. But you can actually see the power of working with others to create the change you want to see. And then I used that in my professional life. So from the mid-80s, I've been doing community development work, and I had 10 years with government. So community development led to economic development. And in an economic development role, I could see how you could work with communities, create change for communities, rather than doing two. And then I was headhunted and went on to be CEO of Dubbo City Development Corporation. And then after that, 25 years ago now, I set up my own business called the Regional Development Company. I've moved to the northeast of Victoria, so I moved from New South Wales to Victoria in the year 2000. And then in 2010, I set up another regional business, which I successfully sold last year. So a real business lens, but all about community as well. And then part of my work is growing rural and regional leaders, making sure people in business in rural and regional Australia also have access to really good minds and good intelligence and working together to get better at their businesses. So it comes out of a personal passion, a community value set from my family, and then just, you know, the opportunities to serve all the way through.
So, Susan, what do you like to do for fun?
Oh, I do all sorts of things for fun. I'm actually, the last probably 10 years has been very much about learning how to recharge really well. So meditation, walking in the bush. I live on a farm, so veggie gardening around the house and just being around the farm. Really, I just love rural and regional areas. So sometimes it's sitting with a glass of wine on the bank of a river somewhere. You know, it's those sort of ways of relaxing that are very nature-based but recharge. Yeah.
It's going to be very important once you're elected in as a senator for Victoria to actually be able to tap into those fun moments and that ability to recharge, isn't it?
Absolutely essential. Again, I think it comes back to that authenticity we talked about before. If you cannot find who you are and don't know how to reground and regroup, then you're going to be an artificial person. And that artificial person is not what we need in politics. We need real grounded people who are absolutely there to listen and serve and represent.
What was the trigger point for you or the moment that you made the decision that you were going to run not only in politics, however, for a very senior, because the Senate is really the gatekeeper for government, to make that decision to actually run as an independent?
So many paths lead to this, but I can remember one particular pivotal moment. It was in the middle of the Black Summer fires, and I had 4 parts of my family in 4 different evacuation centres. It was highly distressing. And I caught up with a girlfriend of mine, Kathy McGowan, and we were talking about it. And I was just telling her how hopeless I was feeling, but how angry. Because 8 months before, in Australia, several commissioners or former commissioners of emergency services had got together and said to our Prime Minister, this will be, the upcoming fire season will be the worst one Australia's ever faced. They weren't heard. They didn't get an audience with the Prime Minister. They made sure that media all knew. They were really saying, we need to plan now. That was the April before our Black Summer fires. So in the middle of the Black Summer fires, I was angry. I was so angry that they had not been heard, that here we were facing these disastrous fires and we felt unprepared. Even though we know how to prepare in the bush for really big fires, it just felt like we'd been abandoned and that we were not prepared at a national level to deal with the enormity of the scale. And so my friend said to me, oh, well, what are you going to do about it? And I went, well, and she was really challenging me to stand up, to speak up, and to really represent regional people. So if you think that's the pivotal moment, But there are so many other things that lead to that. I did the Australian Rural Leadership Program 25 years ago now. In fact, I started my business as a result of doing the program. And when I was doing the program, we had an entire day in the Senate, and it was with the Australian Parliament House Education Office. We spent a day with senators, but also looking at how the Senate works. And it's the place of review in Australian politics. It actually looks at that legislation. It can either put the legislation through and pass it, it can move an amendment, or it can send it out to a committee or inquiry where really good evidence-based work goes on, but not just the evidence base of what makes something happen. Senators can call for lived experience. They can ask people who are affected by that particular thing to come in and address them and speak to them. So I was really taken that it was inclusive, it was collaborative, it was evidence-based, it looked at people's real life situations, and then the laws that were made better because of that work. So that's been tucked away in the back of my mind for a long time. And then in 2012, along with a number of other people in Indi, there were 12 of us, we started meeting in secret in a committee room in a library actually, and formed Voices for Indi, which was the start of the independence movement in Australia. And when we did that, we set up a vision that was really quite clear, and the vision just wasn't for Indi. It certainly started with that, but we wanted to see across Australia a 21st century engaged participatory democracy. We wanted to see people learning about and engaging with their politicians and how they could create change together, not leaving it to the politicians to create change, but walking together to create it. We wanted to be a case study for the rest of Australia. And we actually, at that time, some academics said, gosh, what are you doing? And they started studying us. And now here we are in Australia with this enormous talented pool of people putting up their hands to be independents right across the country, and often going back to saying, well, what happened in Indi? How did you create that change and how did you do it? And having a look at that work. So for me, I think now that when we look at the House of Representatives, the change we're going to see in this next federal election will be tremendous, and that will change the way things are done in the lower house. We need to see that change in the upper house as well. And so this is my way of going into the upper house, is saying, well, it's not been done before to go with a totally independent platform. We certainly have 2 independent senators who've had to form their own party, as in the Jackie Lappy party or Rex Patrick party, and they've formed those parties as vehicles to be into the Senate. And I've got to try, for my mind, to create a pathway where others can go that isn't just about me, but says it's quite possible to get independence up. And, you know, if I'm successful or unsuccessful, creating that pathway will be one of the things that I hope to pass on.
Once you are elected and you're moving into your seat there in Canberra, the capital of Australia, what's your hope for the first 12 months of you being in that position, for your, specifically for your community that you represent in Victoria?
Well, specifically, there's 4 things that I want to see happen. One is that we absolutely adopt really challenging climate action policies, things that actually work for us. What we've got at the moment is there's actually a really great bill that's been put together by Zali Steggall in the lower house. She's not been able to get it debated. My hope is that that gets debated in the lower house, and then as a senator, I do the work across the house to make sure that we can pass it in the Senate. So that's one. Number 2 is a Federal Integrity Commission. Helen Haynes has done a significant piece of work that's had Transparency Australia, a whole range of organisations really giving some good guidance to a great piece of legislation that sets up a Federal Integrity Commission. Once again, I'm hoping that that has its passage through the House of Representatives, and that in the upper house I can play tag and get it through into the upper house. The third one, which was really important to me, is a fairer and kinder Australia, that we actually look out for each other. The recognition of Indigenous people and of First Nations voice to Parliament is incredibly important. The way we treat our elderly citizens and our aged care citizens and our aged care services, the way we treat people with disabilities, but we've got to have a much more inclusive community. And the way we have demonstrated very, very poor leadership on asylum seekers and refugees in our country, we should be welcoming in as an incredible talent pool. I just say to people, imagine if we were displaced. You know, Australia's at the forefront of climate strikes, things that are happening to us all the time from climate change. Imagine if we were displaced, we were climate refugees, we go to another country. How would we like to be treated? Certainly not the way we've treated people who've come to Australia. So that's incredibly important. And the fourth platform is about national resilience. And it's how do we plan for our national resilience? We are going to be subject to many, many shocks in our system over the years to come. I do a lot of work with communities who are recovering from bushfires. I've worked with, it was about 25 communities after the 2009 fires in Victoria to help them set themselves back up and plan for their future. And I've done the same since the Black Summer fires up in the northeast. And there's incredible resilience within humans, but how do we plan for it? How do we plan for it at the national level? How do we support people on the ground? How do we actually build in a really good resilience system? So they're the four things that if I had my magic checklist, if we'd got those things in place, I'd be feeling like I was walking on air. They're things that matter.
Now, by the sounds of it, we are moments away from the actual polling day, the election day. So how are you and your family spending your time at the moment, as far as, you know, and as we know, this is not all about campaigning in this interview, but, you know, what sort of things are you doing to really get yourself known and really allow your community of Victoria to understand why it's so important to have you in the Senate?
Apart from driving around and around and around the state, which is just so important at the moment. I was hearing an interview with Jackie Lambie the other day, and she says that she's just driving around and around and around the state of Tasmania. I can fully understand that. So going to all parts of Victoria and really listening deeply, trying to find out what matters, what's in common, and try to meet with people so they get to understand what an independent senator is about and how I could represent them. We're having to be quite clever. So I say there's a steering committee of around 25 who are around the state of Victoria. And we know that to get the message across, we're going to have to target a very narrow number of people. And those are the people who are going to give us their first preferences, as well as trying to get the message spread in digital media, digital advertising, and we'll be doing some radio as well. So it's very different to run a Senate campaign as it is to run a House of Reps campaign. A House of Reps campaign, even though some of our electorates are very large, you can at least get a pulse or a feel for what's going on. The electorate I live in is the electorate of Indi. And at the moment, Helen Haynes' campaign is going gangbusters. So everywhere it's a sea of orange. You get a real sense of engagement, involvement and excitement. When you're actually running this across the state, you might see the odd cornflake turn up everywhere, but it's much more being invited into communities, going to places where people are meeting, speaking where I can, doing lots of interviews like this one today, so people will get to know. But probably when I think about when we're targeting people, it's going to be people who are more engaged with politics and understand the power of the change of independence in politics. So we can narrow cast, if you like. We can come into that smaller group of people and say you have an alternative. You actually have a choice in the Senate now.
Susan, what do you say to the people that, and I'm hearing this a lot lately, so that's why I'm posing the question. What do you say to, and again, it's because of the very loud noise of independents rising up to stand up for election in the coming Australian federal election. What do you say to the people that say, oh, yes, they're independent, but they're not because they're being fed by or paid by or put there by a major party? How do you address that?
It's to misunderstand what actually has happened. We've had a fundamental change in the way politics is done, and it's a community-based movement. In Indi, for the first two elections, that's both times that Cathy McGowan was elected, the media did not understand us. They could not describe it because we weren't a political party. It was a movement of people behind an individual. And, you know, right now, the media's trying to describe, the media and others are trying to describe politics in their normal paradigm. They're trying to say, well, it's either party politics or it's nothing. They can't quite get that one might come straight from community, be endorsed by community and run for community. So in a way, you don't have to have the argument with too many people. You can just say, no, I'm not part of the party. I also heard Simon Holmes at court recently speaking. So Simon Holmes at court has led what's described as a big giving circle called Climate 200, really getting some very wealthy people together to say, if you put money in to a pot of money called Climate 200, and we can match that money with community money, then we'll use that money, this is Simon Holmes at court's proposition, to fund community-minded climate activists, people who will take their climate passion into Parliament and actually make the changes that we need to see for the future. I heard him speak recently and he said it's quite ironic that I'm raising all this money to eventually get money out of politics. But he's sort of saying there's a set of rules at the moment that says you get into Parliament if you've got a lot of money. He's trying to feed money into the system to get individuals into Parliament. Once they're in, most of them are, like me, really committed to a federal integrity mission and getting money out of politics.
Great answer. Thank you for that. Susan, before I let you go, I'll give you the question that I ask all of my guests. If you had an 8-year-old Susan in front of you right now, what advice would you give her?
Be bold. I was bold at 8. I was already organising classmates and doing all sorts of things, but it's just continue to be bold. And it's actually served me very well, still to learn, but to step out and to be in a courage zone of life. So we have 2 concentric circles. We have a comfort zone and a courage zone in our lives. And it's living in the courage zone where all the changes are made. And so I'd really say to 8-year-old Susan, continue to be bold.
Great advice. Susan, thank you so much for being on our Women in Politics Independence Day episode in our Series 2 today. So if people would like to get to know you more, know what you're doing, understand your policies and, you know, volunteer, support you, all of your contact details are below where any of our viewers, our audience are actually tuning into this interview right now. However, how's the easiest way? Is it your website or?
The best way is straight to the website. It's susanbenedyka.com, and I'll spell that SusanBenedyka.com. And you'll find on there that you can subscribe to our newsletter. It tells you all of my social media handles. It gives you how you can be involved in volunteering, and it certainly has the policies laid out. And a bit of those motivational stories. Why did I get involved? What does it matter to me? And what difference can we make together? Because we're changing politics, but it's all of us together. Some of us will play the politician role. Many of us will play the organising role. Even more of us have to be engaged in politics and create the change we want to see.
Fantastic. Well, look, we're very much looking forward to you taking your seat in the House of Review in Canberra after the next federal election. And I put this invitation out to you right now. Once you're in there, I know you'll be very busy, but we would like to have you on a new podcast where we're catching up with all the independent candidates that have been elected and find out how it's going up there in Canberra. So I would like to extend that invitation to you now.
I would be delighted, absolutely delighted.
Wonderful. Well, look, thank you again, Susan. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on our podcast, and we wish you all the well. We wish you well. I sound like I'm the one that's been out on the campaign trail.
This is really good. I can feel it.
We wish you well, and congratulations on your incredible decision to do this. We know that it's going to go very well. Susan, thank you very much for being our guest today.
Thank you, Jaynie.
And if you've enjoyed listening to this episode of Women in Politics Independence Day 2022 as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you, well, then you know what to do. Comment, ask any questions down below wherever you're listening to this right now or watching it on from our website at jayniemorris.com. Obviously, all the episodes are on our YouTube channel, and you know what to do. Like and share this around, because that is how we're going to build the awareness and build the understanding of why it's so important to have women in politics, especially the independent ones. So I'm Jaynie Morris. Great to have your company. Look forward to the next time you tune in on our next episode. Oh, and if you haven't caught any of the other episodes yet, simple, go to the website, jayniemorris.com, go to podcast, you'll see all of the independents that we've so far interviewed. And if you're an independent and you're running for local, state, federal, country election at any time, make sure you send us an email and let us know, because we'd like to have you on the program as well. I'm Jaynie Morris, wherever you are in this amazing, beautiful world of ours. I hope you have an absolutely fabulous day.